right.
Our president shot, but says fight, 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 fight. America's song is our anthem.
Ooh.
There's only one, and you can have some. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? This is the song about America's fight. It's our time now. The truth comes to light. Our president shot, but says fight, fight, fight. America's song is her anthem. There's only one, and you can have some. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? This is the song about America's fight. It's our time now. The truth comes to light. Our president shot, but says fight, fight, fight. They say that we are clueless, but hear what I say. Red, white, and ruthless. Red, white, and ruthless. Red.
All right, here we are, Red, White, and Ruthless, number 16. All right, here we are. Today we're gonna talk about prison shit again. I have a lot of times when I talk to people, and they find out that I've worked in prisons for a long time. Everyone has questions. It's they're interested, want to know, kind of things that happen and so on and so forth. And we sorry guys. We talk about one of the subjects we talk about is like child molesters and what happens, what really happens. We all see and I think we all hope that they're treated like we hear in the movies and so on, where the inmate population doesn't like them, and they have a rough time, and also high profile inmates. And when I say high profile, it's like maybe it's not like a child molestation case, it's murders or something, and specifically like this dude up in Oregon, Klobuchar, I don't know. He murdered those four college students, and so the question is, how's he gonna do time? First of all, Oregon is, Idaho, my bad, Idaho. Idaho is not they don't have a huge prison system, and I'm not to say that they don't have some bad people in their prison system. It's not it's not like, say, California or Texas, or the bigger prison systems where they've got really significant gang issues and stuff like that. So people trying to make a name for themselves, although definitely, I'm sure it happens. I'm not an expert on Idaho prison systems by no means, but I'm sure it happens. So the question is, how let's start out with, we'll probably kind of do a mixture, but start out with child molesters. So a child molester they go to prison. All right. We'll kind of explain the process and what really happens. All right. So a child molester goes to prison, and just like any inmate, when you first roll up to prison, they're going to want to know what you're there for. All right. What was your crime? Because they want to weed out the child molesters. All right. So you're going to have one or two guys roll up to your cell or to you on the yard or wherever you're at, and they're going to want to see your paperwork. They're not necessarily going to ask you. I mean, they may ask you, but they will want to see your paperwork. And when I say paperwork, there is, for example, in California, it's a 128G, which is basically a document that says what you are in prison for, and historically what you've been in prison for. So not just on that, term in prison, but what have you been in prison for previously? And you're going to have to show it to them. And you don't necessarily always have it. Maybe it got rolled up in your property when you got transferred. Maybe you're brand new and they haven't been issued yet, and that's common, and they get that. But you're gonna have to get it eventually because they know you have it. So you might be able to put them off for a little while. But the other thing they're gonna do is, if you, for example, if you transferred from another prison, let's say you're in Folsom and you came from Soledad. All right, they're going to get with people in potentially in Soledad and say, because they're going to ask you, they're going to say, hey, where were you from? Let's say Calapat, because I worked at Calapat. So let's say you came from Calapat, and this is before it was a fucking PC and all that shit. This is a brand new prison. So, anyways, um, say you came from Calapat, they're going to say, okay, what yard were you on? All right, well, I was on C yard. All right, what housing unit? Who'd you know? Who ran that yard? So what they're asking is, let's say if you're a white guy, they're going to want to know who had the keys to the yard when you were there. You just came from there. So they're going to be able to verify that. They're going to ask you questions about the prison and place you just came from. And number one, because they want to see if, because they'll have other people who came from that joint who should know you if you were there. And they're going to want to know if you actually know who is in charge, from an inmate perspective, who's in charge of that prison. So they're going to run you through some questions. And this is if you're not a child molester. If you're a child molester, you're done. They don't really care. But if you're a regular inmate, they're going to start asking you questions about who you're affiliated with and different shit like that. I'm not going to get into all that shit. But child molester, they're going to ask for your paperwork. So eventually you're going to have to give them your paperwork. And they're going to know that what your background is, and probably the inmate is probably just going to roll up then. And when I say roll up, is they're going to ask for protective custody. I know. So here's what happens, or what has happened over, say, the last 30 years. All right. We've had a lot of inmates, and particularly, child molesters, gang dropouts, whatever, inmates that don't want to participate in, gang politics anymore, who are involved in gangs. You call them dropouts. They all need protective custody. So we started creating essentially protective custody yards. So if you're like a well-known child molester, you're probably just going to go straight to one of those protective custody yards anyways. But let's forget about all of that for now and just talk about if you were a child molester going straight to a GP yard and what happens. So like I say, they're gonna ask for your paperwork. So let's say if you are a child molester, all right. So from that point, I mean, they're either gonna tell you need to roll it up, or they're gonna make you roll it up. Okay, when I say roll it up, they're gonna make you leave that yard. So sometimes they just, and I've seen it where they're just gonna tell you can't stay here. You got to go, and it's up to you to get yourself off that yard. You need to go and talk to staff and tell them you've got enemy situation, whatever. Now back in the day when I started, that's not going to work. I don't give a shit. You're going to have to, if you want to get rolled up off that yard, you're going to have to come up to me when you're bleeding and basically got your ass whooped, stabbed, whatever. Just didn't work back then. Nowadays it doesn't take a lot to get put on a protective custody yard. They call them sensitive needs yards because they're not all child molesters. Like I said, they're gang dropouts and so on and so forth. So the likelihood of child molesters really staying out in a GP, I don't see it as being especially in California, too terribly realistic. They're going to end up having to roll it up to a sensitive needs yard. But that's not every state has these sensitive needs yards. And so you're gonna get your ass beat a few times, potentially stabbed, whatever. Example, when I was at Calipat, there was a lot of child molesters that got stabbed, and there was a lot of actually discipline handed out to inmates who didn't take care of child molesters who were on their yard. And I talked about it on another podcast. Is if your job as an inmate, and whether you're black, white, Mexican, whatever, especially if you're active in the gang roles and shit like that. I mean, they don't expect some dude who's basically not involved in any of the gang shit and whatever. They don't expect him to. Well, actually, I mean, they may. You may have to do it, and that did happen when I was at Calipat. But for the most part, the gangs or the people who are active on that yard and running that yard are going to take care of the child molesters. But and I talked about it on another podcast. You may be some dude, and in my case, it was just a white guy who was not affiliated with, he didn't run with like the Aryans or any of the the white gangs or anything. He didn't run with him. He was just trying to do his time. But he was housed up with a child molester when they found out, and they told him. And basically, it's because he's white. You're white. You're on this yard, and you need to take care of it. The child molester wasn't coming out of his cell. Was the problem? So he knew he was, had a green light on the dude, and he wasn't going to come out. So they gave the job to this dude, and if he didn't do it, then he was going to get hit too. But yeah, that's basically the life of a child molester. Now, do they get raped and all that? Yeah, I'm sure they do. I've definitely seen inmates that get raped, but I don't, the whole sexual, sometimes it's like maybe a little bit overblown in the movies and stuff, but sometimes it's definitely not, because I've definitely seen both male and females get raped in prison. With you have, they'll talk about, you always hear the term, we're going to stick you in the cell with Bubba and all that. And there definitely, there's history for saying that. There was a guy, I think they called him the Booty Bandit, but he was notorious for raping his cellies. There was a guy at Calipat who was locked up. He was single cell because he was raping his cellies. So, sometimes I feel like it's more a tendency of the individual and not necessarily the individual who's doing the raping, and not necessarily the crime of the person getting raped. Although that, we've all heard that can be a punishment, for an inmate who's not doing what he's supposed to. And that happens. Absolutely. So I guess it's kind of a mixture of all of it. But you're not safe if, it's not like you're safe from being raped if you're not a child molester. All right. It can still definitely happen. It's unfortunate, but it's prison. What else goes on? You definitely are targeted for violence. If you're a child molester, you are definitely targeted for violence. That's how they're going to know, is you're going to have to show them your paperwork. Bottom line. Custody. The custody folks, they don't all know whether you are a child molester or not. When you come into a unit, it's not like nowadays, it's easy to find out who, about everyone, nowadays it's easy to find out. It's all electronic. Back in the day, you actually had to go into records and check out what's called the C file, and you had to read the C file to figure out what an inmate was actually in prison for. And just, nobody really did that unless you had a real issue with a particular inmate. I never did it. It wasn't a big deal. You could ask the counselor too. Counselor will tell you if it's that, if that big a deal. But nowadays you can look it right up, on the, on your computer. It's not easy. It's not complicated at all. So staff knows, and they'll kind of look out for you. But yeah, let's talk about staff though. Let's talk about staff. Now, I think I talked about it on another podcast, but how does staff feel about child molesters? They don't fucking like them either. All right, they don't. Are there situations where they're going to make your situation worse? Yeah, absolutely. I told you again on another podcast, I had a partner who was intentionally doing things that would put a child molester in danger. And before I left that prison, I had an inmate tell me he was a porter, that inmate was going to get hit towards the end of the month. They were going to canteen, and they were loading up on canteen. So the relevance to that is when, and this was a Mexican hitting a white, okay, and that's kind of the relevance of it. When you have a different race attacking each other, so in this case, a Mexican was going to attack a white, then there's probably going to be a lockdown until they figure out exactly what's going on and make sure there's no issues, in the future. So I honestly, I don't know what happened with that. I transferred, and I didn't want to know. So, and even if I would have said something, because I had before at that prison and at that time, it wouldn't have mattered, because my sergeant told me, call me when there's blood on the floor. Okay. That was with the one that was locked up in the cell, with the guy. So I knew that, saying anything wasn't going to help. So I just didn't want to really, really deal with it. But yeah, staff knows, and, they may help, they may not. I mean, I tried to do my job. It didn't really help. They get locked up in protective custody. I'm talking about child molesters. They get locked up in protective custody, and they'll spend some time there until they can find a prison, or a yard where they can function on. In California, it's the SNY yards. And even with the SNY, there's believe it or not, they have developed these gangs that are specific to SNY now. So there's still violence, there's still stabbings, there's still all the shit that's on the GP yards. They brought it into the SNY yards now, and they've created their own gangs that are specific to SNY. I think one of the reasons that happened is it was so easy to go SNY, because you didn't really validate much. If an inmate said, I need to go SNY because I have the enemies, they would just, pretty much, especially when it started out, pretty much put you SNY. So I don't think that we didn't help ourselves out when we loaded the SNY yards up with guys who probably really shouldn't be going SNY. And a lot of times I won't say a lot of times, there were times when there were, inmates and gangs who were saying they wanted to go SNY, but they were really trying to get out a specific inmate to stab him, kill him, whatever. So you had to be very careful on that. As far as the high profile guys, there are inmates out there who are looking to make a name for themselves, and so Jeffrey Dahmer was killed in prison. You think that guy, that guy is popular now. Okay. The guy that killed him. So yeah, absolutely. When I think like Scott Peterson, when he drove up to, I don't know where the hell he is now. I wanted to say Mule Creek, but I don't, he might be there. Anyways, I think he got attacked. And I say attacked because sometimes it's just, they're just trying to roll these guys up off the yard. So all you really got to do is attack them. You don't have to stab. They don't always get stabbed and what have you, but many times, I mean, they do. Same for the guys who are trying to roll up from gangs or who are not, say an inmate who's in a gang doesn't do a hit that he was supposed to do or doesn't follow orders. Basically, he could depends on the situation. He could either get stabbed or get beat up. And they let you know how serious it's going to be. Now, when I was at Calipat, there wasn't a lot of getting beat up. It was all stabbings. I mean, there wasn't even any slashings. I won't say any, there was some, but most of the violence was stabbings, and actually, I was a rookie, man. I didn't know what questions to ask. And the inmates knew I was a rookie. So, I think sometimes they expect dumb questions, but I was like, man, why do you guys stab each other all the time? How about just a good fist fight, And the guy, I still remember the guy told me, listen, if it's serious enough for me to put hands on somebody, then it's serious enough for me to want to kill him. It's got to be that serious or I'm not going to do it. And so I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's a good answer, I guess. I mean, what am I supposed to say? But yeah, the high profile guys, they pretty much have to look out for themselves. They've got to have a head on a swivel because anytime they could get it. And it could be, and don't just think guys with, like murder charges and shit, like guys doing life are the ones that are doing the stabbing. I mean, it's not that way at all. Dudes with, maybe less than a year to do, or a couple years to do are doing these stabbings just as likely as a guy doing life. I mean, it's probably more so. So yeah, I mean, they just don't care, maybe they think they'll get away with it. I don't really know, but, so talk about, I covered the, being sexually assaulted a little bit. Will the high profile guys, be sexually assaulted? I don't really, I mean, it could happen, but I don't think that's like it's like a primary thought of the inmate population. It's just, this guy's going to come here and we're going to rape him. I don't see it, could it happen? Certainly. But I don't think that, even this dude from Idaho, I don't think he's going to go in and get raped. I think if they're going to do something to this dude, because he's high profile and he killed these, younger kids, he's certainly not a guy who killed under, children. These were adults. And as bad as it is, and I'm not saying it's not horrible. It's really not, to the inmate population, it's really not that horrific. He killed adults, and unfortunately that's the thought process. It's terrible, but he is high profile. So killing him or, kicking his ass is going to get you a little bit of clout. It's going to be like, oh, you're the dude who put down, so-and-so. Okay. So yeah, it will get you some clout. And that's why, guys like Manson and some of the really high profile guys, yeah, they got touched up here and there, because guys trying to make a name for themselves, are out there kicking their ass and stuff. Not always stabbings, but yeah, they're kicking their ass. Sexual assaults, we'll cover a little bit more. So if you're kind of definitely if you're feminine, or even if you're straight, but you're kind of feminine, you're going to get tested. 100%. You're going to get tested. And there's dudes out there, look at some of these liberal dudes, I don't want to bring politics into it, but it is what it is. Some of them are really feminine, and they're not gay, but they're definitely feminine. They're little skinny dudes, and they're, and they're, their tendencies are just, they're kind of delicate. So you go up into prison, and prison is populated with hardcore motherfuckers, all right, that aren't seeing any women, all right. So there gets to a point in inmates who've been down for so long that in their mind they start looking at men, even though they're not gonna, if they were out on the street, they ain't touching a dude, all right. But in prison, they have that urge, and a feminine dude is not unattractive, you know. And as to me, that's, I'm not gay, um, but to me that's kind of disgusting, and that's not any disparaging comment against gays. I'm just not one of them. But to me, that's just not normal. But to them, it is a little bit. And I again, I've seen that. I've seen hardcore, gangsters in bed together, all cuddled up and shit. All right. So, it happens. They need that, they got that urge. And if you're a feminine dude, then that's the dude that's gonna get tested. My advice, if you're going to prison, start hitting the weight pile, and get ready. If you're a feminine dude. If you are, let's talk about gays in prison. All right. If you are homosexual in prison, you're definitely, obviously, I mean, I don't want to say you're okay with it or anything like that. I mean, if it's not consensual, it's not consensual. But gays in prison, they can do it a couple different ways. And I mean, they could find themselves a man, and I've seen this where that's their man, and nobody else is fucking with you because that's your man, that's your relationship. Sometimes they're even housed together, and that's the deal. Then sometimes, I mean, there's prostitution in prison too, and I've seen this. You'll see, because there's no, in every prison I've worked at, there is a way to get a cell change. Okay, so move to a different cell. All right, you put in hey, I'm compatible, because we're always looking for people who want to be in the same cell, because we've got cell moves and we need to open up beds all over the prison. So if we've got two guys who are willing to be celled up together, then that's great for us, and we handle it. All right. So I've seen it to where, and there'll be a process for that. And on my yard, it was, this is going back years, but on my yard, it was, at the end of the week, you'll submit your requested cell move to the sergeant. The sergeant will review it. The officers in the unit will obviously have to sign off on it, and approve it. And then the sergeant will approve it, and then we'll make it happen. There's like a specific day. Normally it's like on the weekend, Saturday. We'll do voluntary cell, bed moves. So what happens is the gay guy, he'll, and I say gay guy, but the gay guy who wants to prostitute himself will go, he'll find his next client, and they'll put in a cell move, and it'll only be for a short period of time, and, they try to do it, because normally it doesn't take every officer in the unit that works the unit signature. That'd be far too much. They just need to get one officer. So they wouldn't, and also, you may bounce it around the yard a little bit, because eventually we're going to figure out, oh, this dude is pimping himself out. We got to do something about it. We need to find him a home, and he needs to stay there. But up until that point, he's going to pimp himself out and bounce around and try to get different sergeants, try to get different officers to sign these bed moves. But he gets paid, by the guy that he's moving in with. that's he's going to have to perform, but that's okay with him. He's a prostitute, and in whatever it is, 1-2 weeks, whatever kind of deal they have made, then that's what happens. And then he ends up having to move out. Now there's also two ways of moving out. I mean, if you can't get moved, you get in a fight, and then you got to move. All right, so if you get in a fight, it's not like you're going to get locked up, unless there's some serious injury or a weapon used or something like that. But if you just get in a fight, you can fake that if you want to. You'll get booked for it, but if you got to go, you got to go. But anyways, yeah, that's kind of how that works as far as like the prostitution stuff. And I mean, there's many levels to that too. I mean, I'm just talking about the prostitute who wants to make money, by moving around to a different guy, every week, 2 weeks, month, whatever it is, whatever he's getting paid for. I think I've covered it all. Bottom line is, yeah, child molesters have a rough time in prison, as they should. They get killed, absolutely get killed. There was, if you look it up online, there was one killed at Mule Creek, I believe, last week. So, guy winds up dead. Let's talk about that real quick. So, guy winds up dead in your cell. Obviously, if there's trauma to the body, you're definitely getting locked up. But unless it's an expected death, like the dude is kind of on hospice or something, and this would be in a medical facility like CHCF or somewhere, guy's on hospice and he's not doing well, he dies. I mean, it's expected. So you're not going to lock the cell up. It was expected. You're still going to potentially, if there's anything weird. I mean, I don't know. I think the rule is they probably do if it's coming from prison, they got to do an autopsy anyways. But if your cellie ends up dead, you're getting locked up. Okay. And even if you didn't have nothing to do with it, you're going to get locked up until, they know for sure why, the guy died. And I read the article about the Mule Creek guy, and they didn't say there was any trauma to the body or anything like that, but the way it was written was he was murdered by his cellie. And there's some of these inmates that that they target, child molesters. When I was at Calipat, this was just about the time 3 Strikes was coming about, and Polly Kloss was murdered, and she was raped and murdered by a piece of shit, Richard Allen Davis. And I remember having strange things. Polly Kloss's cousin, his last name was Kloss as well, was actually at Calipatria State Prison in 1994-ish, 95, whatever. And I talked to him, and he was like, he told me, he's like, yeah, she was my cousin. I hope that motherfucker comes to, Calipat, because I'm going to kill that motherfucker and blah, blah, blah. I had other inmates, talking about, they view, killing child molesters as trophies, and talk about, they've got, trophies on the wall and shit like that. And of course they're feeling a little comfortable, and saying certain things. But yeah, there's inmates out there that they're hardcore motherfuckers, man. And if y'all didn't, if y'all saw it, I think it was a couple of years ago, but it was a guy in court talking about he had a child molester in his cell, and the child molester was talking about his crime, and the guy told him, "Shut up, dude. I don't want to hear it." And the guy was trying to justify his crime, and he's like, "Man, that was just too much. It was too much." So I waited till he went to sleep. I wrapped a cord around his neck. I choked him until he was dead, and I let him lay there till the morning. And then I knocked on the door, got the prison guard over there, and told him to get this fucker out of here. And just as cold as that, And what is that? Okay, what happens to that guy in prison? Okay, he gets his which he knows he's going to get another prison term and all that. But prison guards don't care about that shit. They're like, dude, good job. Good job. I mean, what are you supposed to say? We're human too. All right. We didn't facilitate it. We didn't help the situation. But as a human being, uh, killing a child molester. I mean, there's people that definitely want child molestation, the punishment to be the death penalty, and I agree with that, 100%. Um, you know, my friend, I don't know if you can read that. Might be backwards, but kill your local pedophile. 100%. Right. That's how I feel about pedophiles. Um, I don't need to hold my tongue anymore. I'm retired and I don't have to watch what I say anymore. And that's how I feel. And so do a lot of Americans. All right. This movement of pedophiles being called maps and all that shit and added to the fucking rainbow and all that shit. Yeah, lose me with that shit. All right. But hopefully I answered your questions today. I don't want to go on too long about this. Yeah, pedophiles have a hard time in prison. They should all go to prison. They should all stay there. The sentence should be death. If not, they should spend the rest of their life. They ruin lives. All right. They should spend the rest of their life in prison, and they should get raped every day. All right, just my opinion. But that's all I got for you today, man. So hopefully this was informational. It wasn't so much of a happy one, but maybe for some, I don't know. But we're going to call it a day, and we're going to play my song on our way out of this thing. And hopefully that answers your question. If it doesn't, hey, feel free to comment when I post this thing. Comment, and I will answer any and all comments, questions, what have you. Make sure to share, like, follow, all of that stuff, because it helps me out and it makes me happy. So. Out.